Welcome to Talk World Radio, a half-hour discussion of politics as if the people mattered. I'm David Swanson. This week on Talk World Radio, we are talking about a successful lawsuit and impactful campus activism against genocide. Daniela Colombi is with Students for Justice in Palestine, an organization that is at the University of Maryland and views itself as part of the international movement for a free Palestine, working for collective liberation, justice, and equality. Daniela was delegated by the board to work on outreach and to testify on behalf of the organization in court. Daniela Colombi, welcome to Talk World Radio.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for coming on and for what you're doing, and congratulations on something successful, a rarity in these times. So are you a student at the University of Maryland, and how did you get involved in this?
Yeah, I'm just a regular undergrad student at UMD. I actually study something that's completely unrelated. Um, but I think that kind of highlights how important it is that, just everyday people from different walks of life are participating in this. And I would say I've been raised where supporting Palestine was never a question. Um, it was an inherent reality that obviously we're going to stand against occupation and with the self-determination and the dignity of the Palestinian people. But that's definitely one of our goals as just students at the university of building that sentiment, building that political sensibility across the entire student body.
So how did you become involved in organized activism, and what were you all up to that resulted in having to file a lawsuit?
I would say in particular, I knew that generally pro-Palestine organizing tends to actually be on the left because you have to have an analysis of empire, an anti-imperialist analysis, generally also an anti-capitalist analysis. So that's kind of how I found this specific angle of organizing at the university. And I would say it's proved quite effective because a lot of us were kind of looking for the same thing. And, other schools have more organizations like in other schools there's dissenters, there's other things going on, but at UMD it's so depoliticized that it's kind of hard, and part of our role is actually rebuilding into UMD like more of a political consciousness. We deal with a lot of vote blue no matter who liberals who like to pretend, like to feign ignorance. You don't get to feign ignorance when you're at a university. It's really, really unacceptable. And, the genocide is very clear. It's not really a point of debate. Um, if you think it's good or bad, that's a clear issue that we have.
Right. But what happened that resulted in having to file a lawsuit? I mean, the university tried to essentially scratch out the First Amendment to get rid of the right to assemble and air grievances, or what happened?
Yeah, so I think we need to base this on also, what is the context of organizing at the university prior to this? Since forever, SJP has been, looked upon not favorably. And that's because it challenges the systems that it's built on, right? UMD is one of the most militarized universities in the entire country. There was a Vice article a few years back actually calling it the most militarized university in the entire US. Um,
How
and
did
this isn't just
measure
this
that?
isn't just yeah, this isn't just because of the police or very superficial things, but because of how deep it runs. There's so many secret labs or required security clearances that most people don't know about. I mean, it's hidden from the students and many of the professors too. So this is kind of what we're operating under, right? Our current president has ties to the aerospace industry. there's there's a lot of interests that are tangled up beneath the surface. And so over the past 2 years, the repression has only increased compared to before. Um, we had gotten things like they would make rules retroactively about chalking with children's washable chalk. Um, you can't put posters up. It like these are fundamental things that already were being denied. So when we made this reservation to do the vigil on October 7th, because again, it's a day that gets a lot of attention, it's a high point to gain even more awareness about the genocide and about the occupation. At first, they accepted our reservation. And I believe that was at the very end of July that we made it. It was accepted through August. By the end of that month, like right before the semester started, they contacted us and told us that apparently they were already coming under pressure. But, the First Amendment exists. We were following the rules. So they were gonna, honor the reservation.
And this is about a year
Continue.
ago.
This is about a year ago. It's kind of crazy how long the process has lasted. And as we enter the school year, we're already getting attacked by Zionists. Because we were going to do a flag demonstration at the very beginning of the semester, which was a symbolic demonstration that we had already done multiple times, right? Which without incident. Um, and actually, the only issue is, of course, the Zionists coming and trying to harass people or video to dox them, etc. But we would put all the flags to highlight all the martyrs that have been lost and a reminder that we need to fight for the living and continue their legacy by actually continuing to fight for a free Palestine with actual self-determination, etc. So we were getting attacked for this. And then the Zionists combined it with the upcoming vigil, which of course they were calling a protest, protest, protest. People should be allowed to have a protest too, by the way. But it
When
was a
when you
vigil.
say when you say attacked, can you be a little bit specific about what that means? Because students here where I am at the University of Virginia were physically attacked for the,
Yeah.
is that what you mean, or do you mean criticized, or what do you mean?
Yeah, at UMD has not quite gotten physical yet. Um, there were around 30,000 petition signatures and over 6,000 phone calls made by Zionists, including ones that are not affiliated to the university, to our university administration, and they crumpled under that. Um, and the issue is that what they did after, if we hadn't tried to use the lawsuit, they could have very well treated us like they did the students in Virginia. Um, because ultimately, the university on the side told us that we were being threatened. Of course, they never say the word Zionist, but they imply it in on so many levels. Um, Outwardly, they acted like we were the threat, which I don't think either of us are surprised about. So we were really, really surprised when we ended up going to court and they went in saying, "Oh, we love SJP. We love SJP so much. We're so afraid for their safety." When in the meantime, they were protecting the supremacists to keep doing their supremacism. That's not the correct way to deal with it, right? If you have supremacists making threats against other people, the way to address it isn't by hiding the people that are threatened, right? It's to actually apply the law to the people who are making the threats.
So,
Um,
so the University of Maryland was publicly opposing your activism against genocide, but privately in court, their argument was that they needed to protect you from threatening uh, pro-genocide activists, and therefore needed to stop you from endangering yourselves by exercising your First Amendment rights.
so on the external level, they never said the words SJP in their outward facing emails. But it was very clear that it was to silence us. But that, yeah, in the public court hearing, that's exactly what they said. And their evidence included things like the Zionists threatening to hold a KKK march and bringing guns to campus, which is kind of insane that you're protecting that kind of behavior, even the ability to go and speak like that and justify it, right? Because again, it enables the supremacists if you allow them to go through with that, if you allow them to hide us, to escalate how they treat us.
But wouldn't you restrict the rights of the people threatening to bring guns and hatred and incitement of violence to campus, not the people they are threatening?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's not even restricting their rights, but actually applying existing laws. Like, if they really are perceived to be a threat, you should have ways that you already established to deal with that, right? And I think that's what showed they also thought it was a little bit of an empty threat in that moment, right? Because otherwise they would have had to shut down the whole campus, if there really was a serious gun threat. But I think the issue more was the fact that it would have enabled these people to go through with it. It would have enabled these people to get more intense with their threats, right? Because they were also threatening the president of the university, in another racist form of threat. So it's all about kind of the continuation of this, how this impacts future threats, future treatment of just regular people on campus. We're just against genocide. It's pretty simple.
It should be. We're speaking with Daniela Colombi, who's with Students for Justice in Palestine. So you worked with a couple of other organizations who brought a suit and won it. Can you describe what happened?
Yeah, so we actually decided to reach out to CAIR and Pal Legal, um, and they agreed to work together on this case, right? So we had a whole team of lawyers, amazing, like they did really a good job. Um, but we even got, support from other First Amendment uh kind of focused organizations, like I believe the Knight Group. Um, so this was also kind of important because I think a lot of people saw it as a very clear-cut case. Um, the university cannot just put like a total ban on free speech for 24 hours. Um, there's just no world that that's acceptable, even by the Constitution, even with a judge that honestly his line of questioning was rather Zionist and rather ideological. But ultimately he cared more about the Constitution than, that framing.
And this was the university's attempt was to ban free speech on October 7th of last year because you wanted to have a peaceful demonstration on that day.
Yeah, ironically, we think that the reason that they banned all of it instead of just SJP is because they know that a discrimination lawsuit would have come out of that. But it's a little funny because it ended up being a federal lawsuit because, they were trying to assault the First Amendment. So turned into something bigger.
And they lost and they're paying $100,000 to somebody.
Yeah, so that it's probably the biggest penalty that we know of so far, um, in a case involving, pro-Palestine student activism. $100,000 is unprecedented, honestly. And that, like we said, is going to go directly to supporting the movement and to organizing, whether it's some of it is going to have to go to legal costs because of course the court system, all of that is very expensive. And then now that we've actually achieved the legal victory, we're getting to hopefully start making a plan for how to use the remaining funds. And our goal is to be able to donate as much as possible. But again, we're going to need legal advice on that because, it's complicated and we're just regular students. Again, like I think this is one of the highlights is that this is something that we achieved as just students who are still having to go to class, still having to manage, different things at home. It's regular people kind of stuff.
Do you think you can fund a lasting organization there? I mean, students notoriously leave after 4 or 5 years, right? So, do you think this will build something that lasts at the University of Maryland?
I mean, I would say SJP at the University of Maryland has lasted. It's just more of a question of for all student groups, improving how we organize, right? Improving how we transfer knowledge and experience. But like SJP, I have friends that I've known since they were in SJP at UMD, since they were doxxed from calling Israel an apartheid state, which is minimal compared to how we discuss it now, right? Now, I've interviewed with school newspapers calling Israel openly a settler colonial kind of like fascist state, and they publish it because they're angry at what I said, but they're publishing the truth. Um, so there's a significant change, and I think that's one of the biggest wins, besides the money, besides legally like being able to use this as a precedent in other cases, is that this is also a really big ideological win. And it really shows that we've won yet another round in like this battle of ideas and about these narratives and against the hegemonization of what October 7th means and, like all the components of this genocide. It's fundamentally changing the way UMD functions, even as one of the most Zionist universities, probably.
And what about the general opinion of students and the community at the university, and how it's been changing over the past couple of years? What was there general support or opposition to what you were doing, and how has that changed?
I would say at this point, it's probably pretty hard for somebody on campus to not know about Palestine or even to pretend that they don't know because we're so visible.
Yeah.
Um, and as students, I think this has been one of our bigger contributions. Because again, UMD is a very, liberal, vote blue no matter who kind of Democrat school. And this means that a lot of them support the wars, a lot of them support the genocide. But a bunch of them also, feel conflicted about it. Um, and so it's our job to kind of heighten those contradictions and help build the space for people to ask more serious questions about the system that we're in, right? About the university's role in the genocide, but not just the genocide, but the global empire, um, and all of the oppression that it basically puts on everybody around the world and here, locally too. I I'm curious to see how people are going to be acting once we go back to school this semester. Um, because it seems like for a lot of people, carpet bombing wasn't a red line, but starvation like irks them a little bit more, um, which is another disturbing thing. But it is going to be interesting to see how people change, right? There were a lot of people that may not have been vocal about Palestine, but were definitely supportive of the lawsuit in the sense that, yeah, this is crazy. It's so clear that the university is so willing to just take students' free speech away, right? They tell us, yeah, well, you can chalk in this free speech zone.
Yeah.
Well, I've talked to the president before, and I told him, I was like, well, you realize if you're calling it a free speech zone, that means, okay, if that's the case, there's free speech inside of the bubble, right? But what does that mean? That means there's no free speech outside of the bubble. So actually, this is like against free speech as a whole. And he didn't really know what to say to that in this like candid conversation because it's true.
I'm glad you had that conversation. I'm glad you all are doing what you are and having some successes. Do you think you have any lessons for student groups, activist groups on other campuses or elsewhere, in terms of what you've been able to achieve? Was this a more blatant case? Did you have a better court case than people have elsewhere, or should there be more cases filed, looking at this precedent of what was achieved in Maryland?
Um, I would say definitely our case had a very strong uh basis because it was about October 7th. So it was genuinely because we started on a Flashpoint date, that meant that the case revolved also around this day. Um, and so it was an even more extreme case that was easy to see about the university trying to suppress us. Um, that said, I do hope that this will be able to be used in other situations. We know there's no shortage of universities repressing their students, but at the same time, we understand how this legal and judicial system works. And, like in a way, we're still like, happily surprised by how it went. In a system where constantly, they're trying to get you in trouble for calling out a politician, for voting to starve Palestinians. Like you don't expect the system to actually follow its own rules, right? Because a lot of the time the US doesn't. Because if the US was following its own rules, it shouldn't be perpetrating a genocide right now. Um, but then you consider, the US is built on genocide, on slavery, on like colonial domination, all those things. Um, I think the most important thing is that you have to just persist. Like this is a long struggle, and I would say it's one that never ends in the sense that we're always going to have to keep striving for liberation and equality. Even if Palestine were free tomorrow, then there's the question of like, what about all the other places, right? Like Palestine won't be ever fully free until we're also changing the American empire. Like structurally speaking, we have to start asking more of our questions of not just, okay, morally this is wrong, but structurally, how do we want to change how the economies are built, how they're connected, how these political systems work? Unless we actually strive to change those things, which again requires decades of effort, decades that you're not going to see today. Um, that's what's actually going to make a change for a longer time.
And requires getting the military contracts off the campus as well as the right to demonstrate on the campus. Are you planning a demonstration for this coming October 7th? And should people show up in support of it?
I would say that the university and everybody else should assume that we're not going to be silent. And we're going to be, announcing more events as the semester starts up again. Um, but it's all kind of we'll see what's happening.
The the thing about the blue no matter who folks you were talking about, if they're red no matter who, they're also for the genocide. But now you've got that team on the throne in the White House a few miles away from the University of Maryland. Does it make any difference? Are people more willing as good Democrats to oppose the wars now that it's, Emperor Trump's war instead of Emperor Biden's war?
That's an actually a very interesting question. And I think we'll have to see when we go back this semester and see people's reactions. I would say overall, it's been about half a year. People weren't acting that different. What's interesting is at UMD, there was a collective consensus among students that ICE shouldn't be in the career fair. So ICE got kicked out of the career fair. The university liked to pretend that it wasn't because of student pressure, but there was a lot of student pressure against
That's
that.
great. That's another
But
victory.
at the same time, it's full of people who would never bat an eye at the genocide. So there's a lot of hypocrisy, and there's a bunch of people that kind of just want to feel good about themselves. But I'm hoping that there's a shift. But ultimately, I mean, like Harris was calling us terrorists. It's nothing new. You know what I mean? These go back to systems. And Biden, Trump, Obama, literally all of them are part of the same system of oppression here in the US as well as throughout the world. And so our solutions have to kind of address it as such too.
Daniela Colombi, we have about 3 minutes left, and you had emailed me something about the final statement from a journalist who was recently killed, as hundreds of journalists have been in Gaza, named Anas Hamal al-Sharif. Did you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I encourage everybody to go read his will, actually. Um, and remember how, he had people asking him, why don't you go to Qatar? Why don't you leave? Because he was one of the most prominent journalists for Al Jazeera there. And he responded, I will not leave Gaza unless to heaven. Um, and I just think it's really important that people make sure to center, their organizing and stuff like that about actually achieving liberation. Um, it's not it's not in our place to let ourselves be so demoralized that we stop speaking. Um, and the people who haven't spoken yet, the people who've been too quiet, the people who went quiet again, or who trivialize Palestinians trying to stay on their land. There's a certain point, like, we're not going to forget what people have done. I'm not going to forget that, Raskin, who's one of our politicians here in Maryland, voted to ban UNRWA, right? I'm not going to forget that. He was instrumental. He is instrumental to the forced starvation of the Palestinian people. He is a war criminal. He is a genocider. And 2 minutes from now, he's going to try to pretend like he was some amazing man who was trying to save the Palestinian people. Do not forget the war criminals. Do not forget who has committed these things upon everybody. And don't forgive. Like, that's a normal human reaction.
Well, I don't agree with not forgiving, because I think forgiving is a wonderful thing, but we don't need the dishonesty. We don't need the forgetting. And Congressman Jamie Raskin has supported war after war, when his father, Marcus Raskin, would be deeply ashamed of that
Yes.
behavior. And we should remember his example as maybe a better way to behave in Washington, D.C. I wish we could go on. I want to talk with you about the horrors that Trump is imposing in Washington, D.C. now, where free speech is under serious threat. But we're out of minutes. Congratulations again on the victory, two victories. One with keeping ICE out of the jobs fair. Daniela Colombi is with Students for Justice in Palestine at the University of Maryland. We will have links up to their work at talkworldradio.org. Daniela, thank you very, very much for coming on Talk World Radio.
Thank you for having us, SJP, on today.
This is Talk World Radio. I'm David Swanson. Take action at rootsaction.org. Help end war at worldbeyondwar.org. Read or listen to today's Peace Almanac entry at peacealmanac.org. All past shows can be heard at talkworldradio.org. Talk World Radio is produced in Charlottesville, Virginia, and syndicated by Pacifica Network. There is no way to peace. Peace is the way.